Miss my wigs. Luckily, I remembered that this was all the rage when I was coming up. You know, everything old can be made new again. Like democracy.
Welcome back, guys, to the second part of aesthetic analysis of the Hunger Games saga, where I discuss all the design theory and history behind the multi-layered, complex world of Panem. Previously, I was focusing on the visuals of the Capitol, the broadcast media and the design of propaganda, while in this episode I will delve into the philosophy behind the main antagonist, the politics of fashion, tech design, and I will dig deeper into the architectural references and vision in the movies. If you haven't seen part 1, I would like to recommend to watch it first, but without further ado, here it is. The Hunger Games Aesthetic Analysis, Part 2. 3. President Snow. So I haven't yet looked at the main villain of the story, President Snow. Snow is an established autocratic dictator and the spearhead figure behind the oppression, as well as the main architect of the regime that rules the Panem. And right off the bat, costume-wise, Snow presents an interesting disparity. Unlike the rest of the capital citizens and their maximalist aesthetics, Snow, by contrast, has a penchant for a much more toned-down elegance, sporting a razor-sharp smartwear with a high-end luxurious details inspired by runway looks, but also with references to historical tailoring. For example, frock coats, traditionally cut, with details hinting at famous historical silhouettes, like Astrakhan wood lapels, prominent in the 30s, famously sported by the King of the UK Edward VIII. Dinner jackets, popular with the heartthrobs of the Golden Age cinema. And smoking jackets, commencing with Victorian gentlemen of the 1860s and becoming a 1930s to-go-to jacket for elegant men at their leisure. He wears a boutonniere, which was a popular fashion accessory for upper-class men between 18th to 20th century. Initially, boutonniere meant to ward off evil spirits and bad luck, as well as protect from the diseases, but with passing time they became a symbol of higher social caste, signifying elegance of its wearer. With these clever remarks in his costume, Snow comes across as this distinguished, somewhat Edwardian gentleman, a man of taste and sophistication, an enchanting proverbial opera-goer, a socialite reminiscent of an old world, even older by the Hunger Games timeline standards. He's also a gardener, having love for personally growing flowers, a hint to a trope from Europeans' literature history. In Middle Ages, garden was an allegory of paradise lost, or a world in miniature, and oftentimes a gardener by proxy representing God, a nourisher, which is quite ironic given the context of Snow's reality. Having this regard for human life, he makes up in caring for and nurturing plants, in particular white roses, which he always carries around. Again, the meaning here is subverted, as white rose traditionally represents trust, hope, purity, and innocence. Worn as an accessory and symbolizing formality and virtue, they were expected to be absolutely free from any flaw.
But nothing says perfection like white.
But as we soon find out, the roses are nothing but a mask under which Snow hides its true intention behind his elegant accessory. And what was meant to symbolize purity and innocence means something exactly opposite.
Young man, when he rose to power, such a clever one to keep it. How? You may ask, did he do it? One word. Poison. Snow would drink from the same cup to deflect suspicion. But antidotes don't always work, which is why he wears roses that reek of perfume. Help cover the scent of blood from sores in his mouth that will never heal.
Another important aspect of Snow's character is in the environment in which he presides. Just like with costumes, the set changes dramatically from what we've seen previously in the Capitol. We get to see a drastic change of styles, moving towards classical interior design. When we first consciously enter Snow's territory in the movie, this Empire-style table is a symbol of this drastic change of the worlds. And really, Snow is all about embodying this ancien regime mentality, hinting at the multitude of takes on classical themes: British, Soviet, American, and French. The same goes for the look of the victor's village. The houses are created in a style of traditional American colonial. The use of this style here aesthetically symbolizes Snow's presence and his total control over its inhabitants. Visually, the houses are more emblematic of the president himself than the victor, reminding us, as that with everything else in the country, that their life are his property. This is cleverly presented in the dynamics of this scene, where Snow, despite being a house guest, takes a seat in front of the desk, which should technically be Katniss's, communicating that she isn't a host even in her own house. Snow's palace also represents his love for old world classic. And while we will omit that these are two completely different buildings with different geographical styles, one looking like your potential Eastern European manor and the other is clearly a French chateau, and that they both are basically a garden side facades, which architecturally doesn't make any sense, but let's just not go there. Okay, but what is interesting though is that Snow's palace, aesthetic-wise, is the very climax in the film's design journey throughout styles presented. And throughout the entire length of the saga, this geographical journey presents an interesting design axis. Focusing on the most outward area, we start the film in District 12 and its dilapidated early 20th century era of industrialism. The architectural-wise, it brings to mind American factory complexes of the 1930s. Moving on by the outskirts of the country, District 13 presents this heavy-duty concrete-clad nuclear brutalism. These are symbolic of Katniss's journey. As we move to the capital suburbs, we get to see a more playful artisan side of brutalism, referencing art of the Eastern Bloc and French postmodernist brutalism of the 70s and 80s. Moving deeper into the city, the shift is stark, going into this funky, cosmopolitan, futurist pop art with references to the design of the 70s and mid-2000s. This design is represented by the character of Effie. And as we move further to the city center, we start seeing classical orders with the fascist strip classicism of the avenue, symbolizing dramatic grandiosity of the militant rule of the regime, finishing in Snow's palace, which is as if completely frozen in a different century, presenting an old world tranquility of aristocratic life. The journey symbolically concludes in a stunning antique greenhouse, a garden proverbial paradise. And this design arc is what is truly compelling stylistically about the Hunger Games. Despite the overall futurism, the closer we get to the main antagonist, the more classical the world around us gets. 4. Politics of fashion. Okay, so in previous parts I already touched on fashion theory and how in the world of Hunger Games, fashion works as a means of social distraction in order to maintain political status quo of the state.
What kind of dress is she gonna wear? Floggings? What's the cake gonna look like? Executions? Who's gonna be there? Costume
design on its own is truly superb, with clothing hinting at fictional high fashion, but also, in movies' own provision of meta-narrative, some of them are literal designs from actual fashion shows themselves. And while fashion is utilized by government-sanctioned entertainment for its own gain, some of it is equally used to subvert its use.
Katniss has her gold Mockingjay pin. I have my hair. I'm going to get you two boys something gold. A token! Show them we are a team. And I can't just... Thank you.
Fashion, along with styling and accessorizing as a symbol of solidarity, has its roots in historical practice. For example, it was a prominent feature of the French Revolution. In times of political turmoil, the meaning of personal possessions may so pass beyond one's simple preference for an object and acquire collective meaning just by an act of possessing it. This extended to accessories of pins and ribbons. Similar to Mockingjay pin, the tricolour cocarde is what started as a symbol of a third estate unity of the working class during the French Revolution. It gained popularity across country, being incorporated into clothes, and soon inspired entire styling, emblematic of sympathizing with the revolutionists. Not wearing the particular style sent a clear message to the opposition, and similarly after the French Reign of Terror, there was a trend for the so-called balls des victimes, an alleged thematic balls for the relatives of the victims of the revolution. Again, fashion played out a huge role as women dressed in robe à la victime, a scanty Greco-Roman dress which resembled plain clothing of the impoverished prisoners, accessorized with red ribbon around the neck to signify guillotine and across the back to mark the X as a sign of the victim. Even the revolution-themed jewelry soon emerged, like those incredible guillotine earrings here, along with the popularity of women's hairstyle à la victime, a mid-length sides and short cut back, exposing the back of the neck, again resembling the haircut of the victims given before their beheadings. Balls des victimes were meant to be a criticism of the terror, as well as a cathartic experience for the relatives. The styling was meant to express sympathy for the victims of the regime. In this context, we can see why Snow felt alarmed upon finding about his granddaughter's liking for braiding her hair.
Your hair looks lovely, darling. When did you start wearing it like that?
Everyone at school wears it like this now, Grandpa.
Which is why all images of the Mockingjay are now forbidden. Possessing them will be considered treason, punishable by death. Justice shall be served swiftly.
Clothing-wise, another thing plays out between the goals of District 13 and Capital. Here, the sartorial difference displays the different approaches to the regime within its own ruling. Capital's toxic strive for luxurious flamboyance of each citizen costs the country its resources and justice, but District 13's imposed uniformity presents a different kind of autocracy. Although born out of necessity of its environment, the intensely regimented way of organizing all social life verged on military dictatorship in equal measure. We don't really know to what extent this regulated lifestyle was adopted freely, or whether it was imposed by the governing faction of the district. In adopting workwear uniforms for all occasions, D13 inflicts conformity, coming at the cost of each citizen's personal agency. In a sense, this lack of freedom in choosing otherwise proves to be comparatively oppressive to the capital. Add to it this total work and life regimentation and collective above individual approach to functioning. Conceptually speaking, if Capital is a pre-French Revolution at its peak overindulgence, the District 13 is an expression of a self-realized militant communism at its worst. Five. Tech. We still need to look at the tech side of the Hunger Games, as technology plays a main role in grounding the narrative in the context of future. For the most part, tech design is pretty typical for the sci-fi genre. Your regular, non-distinctive, grey-blue, metal and concrete-clad dystopia. One of the most distinguishable pieces of design is in cornucopia. Originating in antiquity and prevalent in Greek and Roman mythologies, cornucopia is a traditional symbol of good harvest, fortune and overall plenitude, utilized in art throughout centuries. It's nice to see that the art department have taken cornucopia into more conceptual direction. First, cornucopia doesn't resemble anything specific, but is particular in its design style, emblematic of that distinctive late 2000s trend, a polygonal design, where object surfaces were formed on a plan of polygonal grid. Remember around 2007-2011 where every design novelty was based on origami-like shapes and it signified a sort of techie extravagance, which in turn communicated that the item was conspicuously designer? Come to think of it, that's actually a good idea for the video. If you like to see that, I would love to do the analysis on that, do let me know. Anyway, back to the video. So yeah, for me this design is a somewhat of a nod to that mid to late 2000 aesthetic period. The second cornucopia, however, is based on something specific. A yet another brilliant example of Eastern Bloc brutalist art. A monument to courage. The resemblance seen on this promo poster, again harking back to the Soviet propaganda art references I spoke about in part 1. When it comes to clothing, apart from Peacekeeper's white biker uniforms design, which is as unique as it is amazing, the tech aspect of movies' costumes is mostly grounded in the two categories, sportswear and techwear. For the sportswear, in the first games, again, the look is pretty generic and there's nothing quite remarkable design-wise. Things get more interesting in Quattuquel, with distinctive wetsuit design with hexagonal print pattern that echoes that of techie elements of the environment. At times, the setup for the clothing could easily stand in for a modern sportswear ad campaign, grounding back the narrative to the familiarity of the contemporary fashion. For the warfare aspect of the movies, the looks are based on the military jumpsuits, as well as tactical combat gear, both of which are getting a quick resurgence in popularity in fashion trends of the current years. As to the technology itself, apart from both the very normal, pragmatic, yet quite elegant tech integrated into common objects of everyday use, and the very fantastical aspects of sci-fi, what really stands out in terms of originality is actually Hunger Games' refined UI UX, which is a user interface and user experience design. All of the softwares display compositions of HUIs and SUIs, an overall look and feel of software advancement and user interaction showcase a degree of a real sophistication, while making the advancement of dystopian reality of the Hunger Games feel both very familiar and very authentic. So that will be it, guys, for my analysis of the films. In terms of design, my personal favorites are Peacekeeper's armor design, that beautifully crafted Art Deco train. I mean, this shot alone is amazing. This tendency to use past to create future is something I also enjoyed. Rather than sticking with minimalism, taking references from historical silhouettes and design trends, and channeling it into cultural advancement of imagining future societies, is something I'd definitely like to see more in this genre. Brutalist aesthetic was utilized in a much more playful and creative way than usually in sci-fi. Special kudos to using Eastern Bloc art, we don't get to see that often, that was great. Costume wise, Effie shined throughout, I loved McQueen here and there, but also I think menswear was unsung hero of the saga. Really, the creative tailoring and novelty silhouettes are truly on point here. Also, there are more than few jackets I would love to steal from Snow's wardrobe. Honestly, he is my fashion goal for retirement, not gonna lie. To conclude, as you've seen, the saga has a pretty vast array of style inspirations for the visual motifs of its narrative. I really hope by watching my videos and going through the theory and context with me, perhaps you'll find a new level of appreciation for all the design details next time you decide to delve into the world of the Hunger Games. Thanks so much for watching. Also don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. If you have any suggestions, drop the comment below, and I'll see you for another video coming very soon. Thanks.